Dear colleagues, I think it's time to start. Those who are not yet here will join us hopefully shortly. Приветствуем всех.
I welcome all participants of today's Arria-formula meeting of members of the UN Security Council, which we convened to draw attention to an unprecedented situation. The canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is a traditional church with centuries of history and millions of worshippers, is teetering on the edge of a legislative ban. Its main shrines, such as the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, are under threat of seizure. Its clergy lives in constant fear of physical reprisals, and worshippers do not know whether they will be able to visit their church tomorrow and whether or not they will become victims of the punitive organs of the Kiev regime or the Ukrainian Security Service, for instance, simply for possessing religious literature. We would like to show you a video that clearly shows what is happening in Ukraine today.
Бессовестные провокаторы! Я с 35 лет хожу в православную церковь.
November 22nd, 2022. Outraged Orthodox Christians confronted Ukrainian Security Service officers, blocking entrances and exits to Kiev's oldest monastery. They were looking for alleged Russian spies among the monks.
Беженцев знаете, сколько принимала Лавра? Покажите мне с Луганска!
Today, Ukrainian security services can brand an agent of Moscow, any monk or priest, unwilling to break relations with the Russian Orthodox Church. Dozens of Ukrainian churches have been raided. The formal reason for the brutal crackdown? One church's parishioners had sung a song about Russia. After numerous searches, SBU officers reported they'd found Orthodox magazines printed in Russia. The SBU didn't care that these publications were religious and had been printed more than 3 years before. Old, maybe, but they were from Moscow. In Ukraine, it's long been reason enough to condemn any Orthodox Christian, attack, imprison, and even kill them.
Идет обстрел православных храмов с украинских позиций. С украинского беспилотника долбанули ракеты и убили девушку Мирослава Воронцова. Она была невестой сотрудника Горловского епархиального управления. Несколько монахов за последний месяц просто погибли от минометного огня, от пожаров. То есть это происходит постоянно.
People are gathering to pray in the Church of St. John of Kronstadt, on the outskirts of Donetsk. A few years ago, a rocket fired by the Ukrainian army destroyed the church, but it continues to operate. The people of Donetsk at today's liturgy ask just one question: what's happened to the country where those who pray for peace have been outlawed? And most importantly, who divided Ukraine along religious lines?
Привет, Киев! Привет, Украина!
In 2008, tens of thousands gathered in Kiev to welcome the Russian Orthodox Church hierarchs who'd come from Moscow for the 1020th anniversary of Christianity in Russia. The people chanting here don't know, of course, that in a few short years, those who welcomed the Moscow Patriarch in Kiev will be officially regarded as enemies of the Ukrainian state.
Мы находимся в Мариуполе. Со мной отец Феофан Кратиров, насельник Свято-Успенского Николо-Васильевского монастыря. Он находился в застенках СБУ. Отче, расскажите, пожалуйста, вкратце историю.
3 марта 2015 года меня похитили сотрудники с СБУ из монастыря. И я здесь содержался в управлении на Георгиевской 77, где в течение 3 дней в первых применялись пытки. Сюда заводили, у меня шапка была на голову натянута, так что я не видел ничего. Мне говорили так: ступеньки, ступеньки, ступеньки. Ну и вот, собственно, вход в это вот жуткое место.
Мурашки по спине, когда ты находишься в одной комнате с человеком, он говорит: вот здесь вот меня били бейсбольной битой по ногам. Вот прямо здесь. Говорит: вот здесь вот меня связали и били электрошокером. А тут меня подвергали пыткам водой.
Здесь начали уже и током бить, и, в общем-то, битой по ногам. Удары в голову были, такие боксерские прямые удары. А потом показалось мало. Где-то вот здесь рядом положили на пол наручники, застегнутые за спину, положили на лицо тряпку и водой поливали.
Он не один такой. Их очень много. Десятки эпизодов, подтвержденных документально со свидетелями, что вот, да, батюшку священника просто забрали, и потом батюшку никто не видел, или он вернулся через месяц и молчал очень долго, потому что, судя по всему, прошел через страшное.
Journalist Alexander Yegortsev isn't surprised about what's happening in Ukraine's religious life. For years, he's watched as the cradle of Russian Orthodoxy, subordinate to the Moscow Patriarch, has been described as hostile, something that must be eliminated.
Из соседнего села Евора пришла тревожная информация о том, что там раскольники-автокефалисты захватили православный храм. Тогда я впервые на своей шкуре испытал, что такое захваты храмов насильственные, что такое боевые отряды националистов, когда мы снимали праздник Покрова Богородицы на Западной Украине. Пришла толпа полупьяных националистов, местных жителей, и они стали бить на моих глазах православных священников. Те же самые лозунги «Слава Украине», «Геть москалив» отсюда. Мы пытались заслонять священнослужителей. Руки, пожалуйста, к священнику. Потом толпа нас окружила, меня и оператора выбили камеру. Отпусти камеру! И мы бегом добрались до машины и дальше по горам стали уходить от погони.
Since 2014, with the blessing of the self-avowed Patriarch Filaret, nationalist attacks on Orthodox churches and priests of the Moscow Patriarchy, violating every possible law on freedom of conscience, have become Ukraine's new reality.
Я прослужив 21 рік. Цих людей хрестив, хоронив, родичів близьких, вінчав. Разом з ними гостилися, і він кругом був разом з ними. І зараз ви бачите, що зі мною зробили.
Backed by the government, representatives of the new nationalist church started massive seizure of churches and monasteries.
У нас было одно. Страх за то, что, в общем-то, заберут храм. Моим прихожанам приходилось, в общем-то, по сути, охранять и храм, и дом мой, где я жил тогда.
Сьогодні вони прийшли захвачувати наш храм, який ми побудували.
Был очередной захват храма в городе Турка, Покровский собор. Там служил знакомый мне священник, украинец по национальности, опять же подчеркну. И вот опять пригнали боевой отряд националистов.
Це уничтоження православ'я йде.
Він обікрав церкву. Що з церкви вивіз? Що обікрав не ця церква? Перед церкву ще не вивіз.
Захватывают этот собор. Православных верующих, бабушек вышвырнули на улицу, храм оцепили. Им глубоко наплевать на христианство, на православие, на веру. Главное вышвырнуть православную канонической церкви из храма.
After the start of the special operation in February 2022, hundreds of priests and believers were forced to flee Ukraine. Those who remain live in fear, awaiting arrest and confiscation of church property. The world prefers to ignore the unprecedented pressure that thousands of people are subjected to in Ukraine every day.
Многие священнослужители, в том числе и мне известные, они остались на Украине, несмотря на риск для их жизни, несмотря на угрозы их семьям, угрозы их детям. Они остались со своей паствой. И они совершили и продолжают совершать свой подвиг, возможно, даже исповеднический и мученический.
March 22, 2022, the Verkhovnaya Rada of Ukraine received Bill number 7204 on banning the activities of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. If it's accepted, the state will officially take away all the remaining buildings and shrines from the canonical church. Under the new law, Orthodox priests and believers who refuse to recognize the new nationalist Ukrainian church will be declared state criminals.
This tragic story did not begin yesterday. Metropolitan Antony, at the meeting of the council we convened in January, spoke about the tragedy unfolding in Ukraine. But the Metropolitan is a clergyman, and he cannot always call things by their names which reflect their true reality, and in this regard, a few clarifications are necessary. In 2014, the new authorities in Kiev, who came to power in the country as a result of a bloody coup d'etat, which was carried out with the active participation of neo-Nazi groups, decided to replace canonical orthodoxy with their own puppet, so-called independent Ukrainian church. And this strategy was apparently drawn from the era of medieval religious wars in Europe, when the rule was that whoever was in power decided on the faith. But the Kiev regime decided to implement this rule today. They decided to eliminate the canonical Orthodox Church in Ukraine so that it would not interfere with their political projects. And they have systematically been moving towards this goal all these years. They are convinced that in Ukraine only they and the nationalist groups which form their basis of their power and which openly conduct torchlight processions and rituals modeled on Nazi pagan rituals have the right to make any choices at all, including those on matters of faith. But it is not so easy to implement such a plan in a country where the majority of worshippers belong to the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church. To do this, former president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, decided to create a new church with an almost identical name, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. After that, the Kiev authorities began to put pressure on the priests of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, against whom, in the worst tradition of the religious wars of the Middle Ages, threats and sometimes even physical means were used in order to force them to move over to this new church artificially created in 2018. To do this, as well as to seize Orthodox churches and monasteries, the very same nationalist organizations were leveraged. The seizure of the churches of the UOC, Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and the forced illegal liquidation of their congregations is being disguised as an alleged voluntary move over to the new church created by Mr. Poroshenko. This voluntary moves are accompanied by mass clashes, beatings of parishioners and clergy. After a congregation is formally re-registered, its church is forcibly seized, often with the participation of armed persons. In 2022 and in January and February 2023, nearly 300 raider seizures of UOC communities took place. A practice that has now become widespread is the voiding by local authorities of agreements on the rights to use land plots where churches and other real estate of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church are located. Since October 2022, without any legitimate grounds, Kiev's punitive organs have been carrying out large-scale searches in monasteries and communities of the UOC throughout the country. The Ukrainian Security Service has already carried out some 100 searches in monasteries, churches, and administrative buildings of the UOC throughout Ukraine. Criminal cases are being opened against the clergy. Old newspapers and magazines, books from personal libraries with theological and historical content serve as evidence in these cases. Criminal cases have been initiated against those bishops who supported the canonical union of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Nearly 250 clergymen of the UOC were banned from entering Ukraine. In total, 61 criminal cases have been opened against the clergymen, members of the UOC. In February 2023, a Ukrainian court handed down a 7-year prison sentence to a priest of the UOC on charges of collaborating with Russia. That priest was captured by Ukrainian security forces in the territory controlled by them in the Krasno-Limansky district of the DPR. We would like to show you 2 more videos. On one, you will see the seizure of a church in Boyarka in the Kiev region, and on the other, an attempt to arrest a priest in Chernivtsi. These videos are publicly available on YouTube, and anyone can find many other videos with similar content.
Чого ви сюди прийшли? Я сюди ходжу 30 років. Ви чого сюди прийшли? Поясніть, чого ви мене не пускаєте до храму? Поясніть, що відбувається? Хто ви такі, скажіть? Ви скажіть, хто?
Сегодня, 6 мая 2023 года, происходит незаконный, на наш взгляд, захват Свято-Михайловского храма. Неизвестные люди в балаклавах, военные, прочее, полиция, которая им содействует, на наш взгляд, также осуществляют этот самый захват. Как мы видим, прихожан храма, религиозную громаду этого храма не пускают в храм. Мы видим, что полиция абсолютно бездействует, не выполняет своих основных функций, полномочий, которые возложены на нее законом Украины про национальную полицию. Меня как адвоката к своим клиентам не пустили. Вот. Происходит в данный момент срезание замков, захват имущества храма. Как мы видим, полиция бездействует, поэтому, конечно, это все происходит вне правового поля. Это абсолютно незаконно, на наш взгляд.
Люди у військовій формі, без відповідних шевронах, у формі ЗСУ, залетіли в територію храму, забризкали перцевим балончиком, а потім примінили фізичне насилля. Щось зробили з рукою, щось з ногою. Поліція при цьому всьому стояла, спостерігала і взагалі не реагувала. Заяву від мене не прийняли, адвоката до мене не допустили. Я просила допустити до мене адвоката. Батюшки взагалі...
А що з вами сталося?
Я не можу вчитися.
Один активно.
Що ви робите?
Ну що це робите? Батюшки, припустіть чиняти правопорядок. Припиніть чиняти правопорушення. Припиніть чиняти правопорушення. Припиніть чиняти правопорушення. Нехай він не робить активних дій. Ніяких активних дій. Стійте біля мене. Не робить активних. Батюшки, стійте біля мене. Не трогай його. Стійте біля мене. Нехай він не робить активних дій. Стійте біля мене. Припиніть чиняти правопорушення.
Пустіть батюшку. Пустіть батюшку.
Все, тихенько, я тут роблю. Я його не чіпаю, він просто починає кинути. Тримайте його самі. Тримайте його самі. Тримайте собі. Тримайте його самі. Тримайте самі, бачите. Тримайте самі, бачите.
Давай захватывай, давай что перекрутим. Может, давай что перекрутим.
В декабре 2020
In December 2022, Zelensky's decrees approved the decisions of the National Security Council of Ukraine to impose sanctions against 14 hierarchs of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church who are citizens of Ukraine. This means, among other things, that they are effectively stripped of their property on the territory of Ukraine and have their personal rights infringed. By direct decree of Vladimir Zelensky, 12 bishops of the UOC have been stripped of Ukrainian citizenship, which is likely to be used as a basis for their forcible expulsion from the country. Now, however, the Kiev regime has decided to drop all pretenses and simply introduce several draft bills to the Ukrainian parliament on banning the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and confiscating all of its property. One of the bills was introduced on the direct instructions of Vladimir Zelensky on January 19, 2023. So far, these bills have not been passed, and we appeal to everyone who is present in this hall or listening to this broadcast to speak out and declare that such laws are unacceptable and should not be adopted. In a number of western regions of Ukraine, a campaign is gaining momentum to ban the UOC at the regional level. This has already been done in the Zhytomyr, Rivne, Volyn, Khmelnytsky, and Lvov regions. In total, from March 2022 to February 2023, there have been some 81 decisions by local authorities to ban the activities of the UOC's religious organizations. The councils of Lviv, Kyrograd, Chernivtsi, Ternopil, and Rivne regions called on the Verkhovna Rada or parliament to ban the Ukrainian Orthodox Church throughout the country. Something that has become a symbol of the persecution of the canonical Orthodox Church was the decision to revoke the churches of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra from the use of the UOC and transfer them over to the use of the schismatic so-called Orthodox Church of Ukraine. The Kiev-Pechersk Lavra is a symbol of orthodoxy in Ukraine and in the world. It is one of the largest operating monasteries, and a monument to global Christian civilization. To what could one compare such a decision? It's as though a district court in the city of Rome found flaws in the title documents of St. Peter's Basilica. However, you will not read about this tragedy in any international media. The High Commissioner for Human Rights will remain oblivious to the situation, and the Western members of the Council will likely tell you that this is all disinformation. But for those who have doubts, I suggest that you read the decision of the Kiev court, which is publicly available. Since March of this year, the monks of the Lavra are being threatened with forcible eviction. At the same time, they are being promised a place in the Lavra if they renounce their church and go over to the schismatic Orthodox Church of Ukraine. The monks and parishioners have tried to peacefully prevent the capture of the Lavra, and the Kiev police responded to this with beatings, detentions, and accusing protesters of disturbing the public order. On April 1st, the Security Service of Ukraine placed the vicar of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, Archimandrite Pavel, under house arrest, and he was ordered to stay away from the Lavra. I would like to once again emphasize, as I did at the meeting of the Security Council, that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church did not ask us to hold today's meeting and did not authorize us to speak on behalf of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church at the UN. And we are not speaking on behalf of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. We want to draw attention to the outrageous violations of all possible norms of freedom of religion and even basic moral norms. Millions of Orthodox Christians in Ukraine are being discriminated against. We call on all UN member states and observers, the UN Secretary General, international human rights organizations to prevent this coming tragedy. We convened a meeting of the Security Council to prevent the situation from slipping into disaster. However, the representatives of the West, with their characteristic disregard for any offenses or crimes committed by their clients, have essentially spoken out in support of Kiev's policy. According to some, religious communities are not protected by the right to freedom of religion at all. Let us commit this statement to memory. It will still find its place in history. Others have argued that the disaster we are describing simply does not exist. It was because of this that we decided to invite briefers who are personally familiar with these so-called non-existent persecutions. But before I give them the floor, let me show you two videos, in one of which you will hear a statement by a parishioner of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, and in the other, an address from the monks of the Lavra themselves.
Это безобразие. Считаю, что просто преступление. Это со стороны властей. Во-первых, религия отделена от государства. Во-вторых, наша православная вера, старинная вера, князь Владимир, равноапостольная княгиня Ольга, это все наше, и вмешивать сюда политику нет никакого смысла. Если будет ПЦУ, я сюда в Лавру буду, может, ходить только к мощам, совершенно не участвуя в молитве с ПЦУ, потому что мощи есть мощи, это святое. И я считаю, ПЦУ это организация клубная, это не православная организация, это клуб по интересам, потому что он создан на воздухе, а не от апостолов.
Дайте можливість братії, монашествам, віруючим людям молитись, жити. Повірте, ми не вороги.
If someone wants to come here and beat us, we aren't afraid of anybody.
Нас більше 200 чоловік, тільки братії з послушниками. Сьогодні тут знаходиться центр управління Української Православної Церкви.
Suntem acum în Sfânta Mănăstire Lavra Pecerska din Kiev, unde se află peste 160 de sfinte moaște. Această Sfântă Mănăstire vreau acum să o închidă.
We did nothing against our church, nothing against our country.
Ми молимось і просимо, щоб молитва ця ніколи не закінчувалась на цій Богом благословенній землі.
Сейчас
And now, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Mira Vladimirovna Tarada, director of the NGO Foundation to Battle Injustice. You have the floor, Ms. Tarada.
Мира Владимировна, вы слышите нас?
Mira Vladimirovna, can you hear us? Yes. Good morning.
Hello, everyone. I would like to speak today about the violation of the rights and persecution of Christian believers in Ukraine that has reached the scale of anti-Christian persecution in ancient Rome. Religious persecution and repression against Christians began to occur with frightening frequency in Ukraine. During the 12 months of 2022 and 4 months of 2023, hundreds of Christian sites were attacked. Thousands of parishioners and clergy faced persecution because of their faith. The abbots of churches and monasteries are abducted by the Ukrainian special services. They tortured and kept in unbearable conditions, forcing them to renounce their faith. It's believed that some cases of discrimination or harassment are the result of tension between different religious groups, while others are the direct result of individual or institutional BS on the part of the current Ukrainian government. Orthodoxy has become a political project in the hands of the Ukrainian regime. The attacks on representatives of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church began long before the start of the special military operation. But after February 24th, 2022, they acquired catastrophic proportions. In less than a year, about 100 religious sites in the area of the special military operation were subjected to various kinds of repression by the Ukrainian government. Clergymen who continue to fulfill their duty despite the difficult social situation and military censorship are abducted and beaten, tortured, and kept in inhumane conditions. In addition, the abbots of churches are forced to publicly speak against the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Direct state pressure on the UOC has been systematically exerted since 2014, but then this process had a much smaller scale. Zelensky willingly picked up the persecution against the clergy. It's known that clerics are accused of high treason for having literature with a double-headed eagle, as well as for historical books devoted to the common history of the Russian and Ukrainian people. The wave of persecution, repression, and abuse of believers and clergy in Ukraine has reached unprecedented and proportions since the time of pagan Rome. Zelensky's government denies citizenship to priests who are suspected to having ties with Russia, and also conduct raids and searches in churches. In January 2023, Zelensky suspended the citizenship of 13 priests, as it was mentioned, of the UOC, who, due to the unprecedented tightening of Ukrainian legislation, could be expelled from the territory of Ukraine. A month earlier, a Ukrainian politician imposed sanctions against 7 prominent figures of the UOC. Among the victims of the sanctions, the managing director of the UOC, Metropolitan Anthony of Borispol, and Bravarsky Metropolitan Panteleimon of Lugansk and Alchevsk, Metropolitan Luke of Zaporozhye and Melitopol, Metropolitan Miletius of Chernivtsi and Bukhavina.
Looks like we lost connection. У вас есть связь? У вас есть связь?
Since November last year, the Security Service of Ukraine has been conducting searches and shrines and churches throughout the country. Some representatives of the clergy who are accused of provocations against the state and the army face serious accusations devoid of any objectivity. Clergymen are stripped naked. They are photographed and searched, in some cases abducted, and sentenced to real prison terms. In January 2023, the Ukrainian Prosecutor Office opened a criminal case against Metropolitan Pavel Lebed, rector of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra. He is accused of inciting religious hatred because of the cleric's statement to the Ukrainian authorities, whom he accused of persecution of the church. In March of this year, the Ministry of Culture of Ukraine unilaterally terminated the lease agreement of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra and demanded that the monks of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church leave the monastery or go to the Schematic Orthodox Church of Ukraine. For refusing to carry out the orders of Kiev, the vicar of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, Metropolitan Pavel Lebed, was accused of inciting interreligious hostility and justifying the armed aggression of Russia. Kiev security forces, Ukrainian nationalists, as well as representatives of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra Reserve, are trying to block monks and parishioners from entering the territory of the Lavra. Clashes and provocations regularly occur. As of May 2023, the Security Service of Ukraine has opened about 75 criminal proceedings against representatives of the UOC. While militant atheist groups and schematic forces in Ukraine continue to desecrate the symbols of the Orthodox faith, which have sacred significance for tens of millions of citizens, the Ukrainian mass media are conducting campaigns against believers. Christians are increasingly facing criticism and persecution in all spheres of life, from mass culture to publication on social networks. The persecution of representatives of the UOC in Ukraine is an unprecedented challenge to the modern world, requiring global awareness, diplomatic efforts, and cooperation between countries and intergovernmental organizations. Only by joining efforts can a more just and tolerant society be created, where everyone can freely practice their religion or beliefs without fear of persecution. I hope that the United Nations will not ignore the problem of the persecution of Christians in Ukraine. Thank you.
Спасибо вам.
Thank you very much, Mira Vladimirovna.
Trying to connect with our next briefer, and I will be advised whether the connection has been established shortly. While we are trying to connect, I think that in order not to lose time, I will start with the Security Council members that asked for the floor, and then when the connection is established, we will give the floor to our next briefer. And first on my list is Ecuador, please.
And I must now ask to see whether any UN member states who are not members of the Security Councils wish to take the floor. I see none. It is therefore time to conclude today's meeting. I thank our briefers for taking the time to convey to the international community the truth about the threats to freedom of religion in Ukraine. We heard in one of the statements about who destroyed the peaceful life of the innocent inhabitants of the country, and we have different views on this, something we've addressed repeatedly. You have turned a blind eye for a long 8 years to the crimes of the Kiev regime against its very own citizens in Donbass. And for some reason back then, you were completely unconcerned by the destruction of the peaceful lives of those innocent people. I wish to stress, especially for those who does not believe in what was said by us and the briefers today, and especially those who, once again, is calling what we have said today disinformation. Persecutions against the Ukrainian Orthodox Church did not begin in February of 2022. This is a campaign that has been systematically implemented by the Kiev regime since at least 2014, after the coup in Ukraine. Now, it has gone beyond all bounds. None of our former Western colleagues has called on Ukraine to uphold and protect the rights of worshippers. Unfortunately, some of you simply don't understand or do not wish to understand the meaning, the true meaning of what is going on, and what sort of persecutions are being carried out now against the Ukrainian Orthodox Church with the full support and even on the orders of Kiev's authorities. We nonetheless call on our colleagues in the Security Council, member states, and observers in the United Nations, as well as international human rights organizations, to think on the information that was shared today and to exert influence on Kiev in order to prevent a catastrophe and put an end to the persecution of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and its millions of parishioners. I also wish to draw attention to the fact that all of the materials that have been presented by our briefers in our mission today are available via the QR code, which is about to be displayed on the screen. And the links to these materials will also be posted on the mission's website and our social media accounts. I thank you for taking part in today's meeting, and this meeting is adjourned.